everybody. Welcome in. You guys know her. You guys love her. Emily Walkenhorst, our amazing education insider. You always break it down, and really appreciate you for everything that you do with that. And you put out recently a really good article, and I'm just going to read verbatim. North Carolina still ranks towards the bottom nationally in teacher pay, according to a new report from National Education Association. The report ranks the state 43rd. Remember, there's 50 states, 43rd. Teacher pay and 38th in starting teacher pay. These rankings are about the same as last year, so that means that there's no progress, right? Mm-hmm. And last year, the state ranked 43rd in average teacher pay and 39th in beginning teacher pay. What did you feel when you first saw this data?
Well, I wasn't completely surprised it hadn't changed much. One thing you have to remember is this is all based off of the last complete school year. Okay. That way they're able to gather all of this data. They have final information on how much everybody was actually paid. So we're really talking about the 2024-25 school year. And we know that there were some teacher raises, but everybody's also raising teacher pay. Like every state is really doing this. Some are doing much bigger raises than others. So I'm not surprised that North Carolina didn't move just because the raises weren't, these big monumental raises that I think it would require to really jump a bunch of spots. But one thing you also have to remember is we don't have a comprehensive budget for the current school year. And we only have about 2 months left in the school year. If there is a comprehensive budget that does provide teacher raises, teachers would get that as back pay. Some school districts are going to pay that in salary. Some are going to pay it in bonuses, which are going to be taxed at a very different amount. And so there's a possibility teachers won't see significant raises this year, that all they're going to see is kind of that step increase for adding a year of experience, which might be no money. If you're a more experienced teacher, might be, as much as $900 if you're a less experienced teacher. So that's really the only raise they've gotten so far this year. So that ranking, if nothing changes, is going to go down. It looks like the state could be 46th.
That's a struggle. All right, let's get into the numbers here as well. Data shows average teacher pay was about $60,000 during the 24-25 year, up from about $58,000 the year before. Average starting pay was about $45,000, up from $42,500 the year before. Projections for this year show average salaries dropping to just under $60,000. Projections don't include an estimate for starting pay. And again, like you said, you talked about how this was the previous complete school year, and we're still waiting for this school year to start. What's kind of the hope here numbers wise? What's the ballpark that we're looking for here?
So we've got a lot of different proposals out there. So the House budget, that's the Republican-led state House, they want to raise teacher pay by on average several percent. It would depend what your experience level is, what you would actually see. There would be a little bit of compression because the raises would be bigger for less experienced teachers. They wouldn't be as big for most experienced teachers. And the governor is requesting something very similar. He wants to see big raises, even bigger raises than the House. And the Senate is proposing much, much smaller raises. In some cases, maybe only a couple percent, maybe less than that, depending on your experience level. What we're all really kind of looking at is how much money does the state actually have to spend. You hear them talking about Medicaid and, other things that they need to fund, debate over tax cuts, things like that. And then the North Carolina Association of Educators, which is an affiliate of the National Education Association, which put out this report, they want 25% increases for everybody. That's a far bigger number than we've really heard from Republican General Assembly leaders and the Democratic Governor, Josh Stein. So what we're hearing from teachers is a much higher number than what we're actually hearing from the policymakers. And it looks like, there's really a stalemate among the policymakers over how big these raises should be.
Absolutely. So let's break this down a little bit politically. Can you talk about what angle the Senate is coming out at the issue and what angle the House is coming at the issue and why they're kind of different there?
Yeah, so it has to do with kind of your plans and priorities. So the Senate has always, actually, the General Assembly, for the last several years, they've really focused on reducing corporate income taxes, reducing personal income taxes. And the Senate really wants to stay focused on that. They want to stay to the schedule. They want to see those percentages continue to decline. And the House is at a point where they're thinking, I'm not sure that if we do that, we'll have enough money to do the things to fund the things that we need to fund. So that's kind of the central difference is the Senate is thinking, well, we need to cut these taxes, and the House is saying, well, I don't think we can afford to cut these taxes. And we've already cut them a lot. I mean, the corporate income tax is several percentage points lower than it was, 10 years ago. And so personal income tax rates are down at the state level. So the House is thinking, we've already done this, but we also need to make sure that we're able to fund teacher pay. There are other things they're disagreeing over, but the teacher pay issue represents a significant dollar amount that's absolutely at the center of this conversation.
Is there any hope for the teachers after reading this article here, or is there going to be a brain drain? Are they going to exit the state, or are they just going to leave the profession altogether as the job market's getting more robust, more competitive as well? What are you hearing from teachers?
So actually, there in a press conference yesterday with the North Carolina Association of Educators, President Tamika Walker Kelly was asked that question. Do you think that looking at a projected ranking of 46 for the current school year will move the needle in any way? And she said, we think it will because, it's so low. It's so much lower than it had been. For sure. How do you not respond to this? But also at the same time, that's her business. That's her work. She's working really hard on this. And so you have to be optimistic as somebody in her position for that. And there are teacher raises, generally with every new comprehensive budget. There were some times where, especially in the Great Recession, it couldn't be, exactly what it always had been before that. So there, there's this idea there will probably be raises, but will it move the needle is a big question. And something we know about the teaching profession is you are required to have a college degree. It doesn't have to be in education. We're seeing a huge increase in teachers who do not have education degrees. There are just people switching careers and choosing a classroom and getting their education training while they're teaching a class. There's a huge increase in those teachers.
I know a couple people that are doing that route.
Yeah. And, in part, that's because people are recruiting them. They can't find teachers coming out of teachers' colleges. So they're finding people, especially if you have experience in a certain vocation or something that makes you a really valuable career and technical education teacher, anyone skilled at certain social work type professions could make a good special education teacher. So they're getting recruited by principals, but it's because not as many people are coming out of these teacher preparation programs or really sticking around. After 3 years, it's, just more than half of these people are actually sticking around. And then they got a whole education degree and, they're just not staying in the classroom. So there's a lot of turnover. There's not necessarily a lot of interest because, you have to have a degree. And if you're a teacher, you are making about 75 cents to the dollar of what the average college educated person is making. So compared to everybody else who has a bachelor's degree, you're making significantly less money than them. And so a lot of teachers are thinking this is just not enough money. They're taking on another job. They have too many roommates, and they just don't want to do that. Stress is also a big part of it. Especially beginning teachers, they work a lot of hours. I've talked to numerous. They're kind of just getting the hang of things. They need some mentorship. They're ending up working 60 hours and they're going, this just isn't for me.
Thank you so much for informing the public, and thank you. Where can people find your reporting online?
Go to the education section of WRAL.com.